Okay, I have to be honest. When I think of the good old days in America, I usually picture, barbershop quartets, maybe some penny candy.
A nice stroll in the park?
Exactly, a nice stroll in the park. But after going through this stack of documents you brought in today, I am, I'm seeing things a little
A
differently.
little less nostalgic, maybe.
Lot less. I mean, we're talking about a version of America that feels like a completely different planet. A place where the government basically just said, hey, good luck out there.
Try not to die.
Yeah. And we're the sausage. Well, we'll get to the sausage.
Definitely will. But you're right. We tend to take modern America for granted.
Yeah.
The superpower, the regulator, the country with safety nets. But that America had to be invented. And today we're looking at what is essentially its birth certificate.
And it's a really tight timeline, right? We're looking at, 1899 to 1917?
Less than 20 years. But in that sliver of time, the United States went through this massive identity crisis. And these 6 documents, they capture a nation just tearing itself apart over 2 really fundamental questions.
Okay, so lay them out for us.
Question 1 is, are we a republic that stays home and minds its own business, or are we, a global empire that polices the world?
Okay.
And question 2, is the government's job to stay out of the economy, that old laissez-faire idea, or is it to step in and protect its citizens?
From poisoned donuts and rat-infested meat.
Exactly. So we're going to see how the U.S. government went from this totally hands-off approach to becoming the world's police and the inspector of your lunchbox.
Let's start with the lunchbox, because I read the excerpts from Upton Sinclair's The Jungle.
From 1906.
And I may never eat again. I always thought this was just a book about how hard it was to be an immigrant in Chicago.
And it is that. I mean, Sinclair was a socialist. He went into the packing towns to document the abuse of workers, the wage slavery, all of it. He wanted to write a book that would make Americans rise up for labor.
But that is not what happened, is it? Because when I read this, I wasn't really thinking about the worker's paycheck. I was thinking about the rats.
The rats are what everyone remembers.
The detail is just stomach churning. He describes meat piling up on these dirty floors, workers spitting on it, and then the rats. He says they would just race over the piles of meat.
Right.
And the packers, they'd put out poisoned bread to kill the rats.
And here's the kicker.
The rats eat the poisoned bread, they die, and then the workers just shovel everything. The meat, the dead rats, the poisoned bread, all of it into the hoppers together to make sausage.
It's a truly horrific image. Poisoned rat sausage wasn't exactly on the label.
So Sinclair releases this book. He's expecting a socialist revolution. What does he actually get?
He gets a consumer panic. There's a famous quote from him where he says, "I aimed at the public's heart, and by accident I hit it in the stomach."
People didn't riot for the workers, they just stopped buying meat.
Which, I mean, you can't blame them.
No. If I find out my breakfast might have borax and glycerin, which the source also mentions they use,
Oh yeah, to freshen up old moldy sausage.
I'm calling my congressman.
And that's exactly what happened. This is a huge pivot point for us. President Theodore Roosevelt read The Jungle. Now, Kiara was no socialist. He actually dislikes Sinclair's politics.
But he read it.
He read it. And the story goes, he threw his breakfast sausages out the window of the White House after reading it.
That's such a great image, just sausages flying onto the White House lawn.
It mobilized him. In 1906, the same year the book came out, we get the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act. And this is crucial because it marks the death of caveat emptor.
Let the buyer beware.
Yep. Before this, the attitude was, if you buy poison meat, that's your problem.
Sucks to be you.
Pretty much. And suddenly the government says, no, the market won't fix this. We have a moral obligation to protect people. It's a massive expansion of federal power, all triggered by a stomachache.
So we have the government stepping in to clean up the factories. But the progressive movement wasn't just about food safety. It was about the people
Right.
in the slums near those factories. Which brings us to Jane Addams.
And 20 years at Hull House from 1910.
Right.
Jane Addams is one of my favorite figures from this era because she just defies all the stereotypes. A woman of her background, wealthy, educated, was supposed to marry well and maybe run a charity ball.
Instead, she moves to the south side of Chicago. But help me understand this, because the text calls it a settlement house. How is that different from, just a charity?
The difference is proximity. Addams and her colleagues, who were mostly educated women, they didn't just visit the poor, they moved in with them. They bought this rundown mansion, Hull House, right in the middle of a poor immigrant neighborhood.
So they're literally neighbors.
They're neighbors. And that changes everything. When you just visit, you might judge. But when you live there, you start to understand. She famously called this socializing democracy.
That's a heavy phrase. What does she mean by socializing?
She meant making democracy work on a social level, not just a political one. I mean, look at what they offered. It wasn't just a soup kitchen. They had daycare for working mothers, which was revolutionary.
Wow.
They had evening classes. They taught trades like stenography, telephone operation.
So they were giving women the skills to actually be independent breadwinners.
Yes. But the real shift was philosophical. The dominant theory at the time was social Darwinism.
The idea that if you're poor, it's because you're lazy or unfit.
Exactly. A convenient thing to believe if you're a millionaire. But Adams lived with these people. She saw they worked incredibly hard, but were just crushed by the system.
So it wasn't a personal failing?
No. In the book, she writes that the settlement is an attempt to relieve the overaccumulation at one end of society and the destitution at the other. She saw it as a structural problem.
Poverty wasn't a character flaw. It was a systemic failure.
Precisely. And that meant the solution had to be systemic. And this work, this idea, eventually won her the Nobel Peace Prize in 1931.
Okay, so a theme is emerging. Domestically, reformers and the government are taking on more responsibility. They're saying we can't just let things rot. But this is where the identity crisis gets really complicated.
Right.
Because at the same time we were fixing our own cities, we started looking at the rest of the world and saying, hey, maybe we should fix that too.
And that impulse to fix, to manage, to police, that leads us straight into the imperial debate.
I think most of us assume America just sort of naturally became a superpower. But these documents show there was a huge fight about it. We have one here from 1899, the platform of the Anti-Imperialist League.
This is a fascinating group. It was this coalition of people who normally couldn't stand each other. You had labor leaders, writers like Mark Twain.
Oh, Twain.
Oh, yeah. And robber barons like Andrew Carnegie.
Wait, Andrew Carnegie? The steel guy?
Right.
Why would he be against an empire?
Carnegie actually offered to buy the Philippines from the U.S. government just to set them free. He thought holding colonies was bad for business and, more importantly, bad for democracy.
So what was their main argument? I see the phrase criminal aggression in the text.
They were strict constitutionalists. They said, look, the United States was founded on the consent of the governed.
Right.
So if you go to the Philippines and rule over people who didn't vote for you, you are betraying the Declaration of Independence. They called imperialism hostile to liberty.
It's a solid argument. We threw off an empire, we shouldn't become one.
A very solid argument. But they lost.
They absolutely lost. And the man who really beat them, rhetorically at least, was Theodore Roosevelt.
Which brings us to 1906 and his speech on the Panama Canal.
Yeah, the Panama Canal is one of those things we learn about as a great engineering feat, and we kind of skip over how we got the land.
Oh, we definitely skipped that part. The context is wild. The U.S. wanted a canal. The land belonged to Colombia. The U.S. offered to buy it. Colombia said no.
So that should have been the end of it.
You'd think. But Roosevelt was not a no kind of guy. The U.S. basically signaled to some rebels in Panama that if they declared independence from Colombia, the U.S. Navy would be nearby to offer support.
So he helped break a country in half just to get a construction permit?
That's a good way to put it. And in this speech, Roosevelt isn't apologizing. He's bragging. He calls the canal a stupendous work of epic nature.
He frames it as a gift to civilization. Like, Colombia was in the way of progress, so he moved them.
Exactly. But look at the cost. The source mentions the conditions. We're talking yellow fever, malaria. The death toll was astronomical.
I saw a note that workers would often use their first paycheck to buy a coffin.
Yeah, grim stuff. But for TR, the ends justified the means. And this leads to the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. He declares that the U.S. will be the international police power of the Western Hemisphere.
Police power. That's the key phrase right there. We're not just a neighbor anymore. We're the cop on the beat.
That's it. If a country in Latin America is acting uncivilized by our standards, TR says we have the right to intervene. It's the same fix-it energy as Jane Addams, but applied to entire nations.
That is a terrifying parallel. We know what's best for you, whether it's your food in Chicago or your government in Panama.
It's the paradox of the whole era. The desire to improve things so often slides into a desire to control them.
And if TR opened the door to being the world police, our next president, Woodrow Wilson, basically drove a tank through it.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is, looking at these documents, he really didn't want to. Not at first.
No, he was dragged into it kicking and screaming. We have 2 speeches from him just 3 years apart. The difference is jarring. The first is from 1914, when World War I breaks out.
And his message is total neutrality.
He urges Americans to be impartial in thought as well as in action.
Impartial in thought. How is that even possible? The world is on fire, and you're asking people not to have an opinion.
It sounds naive, but his reasoning in the text is actually very practical. He says, "The people of the United States are drawn from many nations, and chiefly from the nations now at war.
Oh, right. We're a nation of immigrants. German Americans, British
We're
Americans.
Russian Americans, Italian Americans." Wilson knew if the U.S. picked a side in 1914, the war wouldn't just be in Europe, it would be on the streets of New York and Chicago. He was trying to keep the melting pot from boiling over.
So 1914 is stay out of it to save America.
Yeah.
But then we get to 1917.
And everything changes. German submarines, the Zimmerman telegram, Wilson goes back to Congress, and the vibe is completely different.
It's a total reversal.
Yeah.
But it's how he sells the war that's so important. He doesn't just say, they sank our ships.
That's in there, but it's not the main point. He elevates the war into a moral crusade.
Right, he talks about the German government as a natural foe to liberty. But, and this caught my eye, he says we have no quarrel with the German people.
A critical distinction. He frames it as a tyrannical government that has hijacked its own citizens. So fighting Germany isn't conquering them, it's liberating them. Sentence changed American foreign policy forever. Before this, wars were about land or money. Wilson says, we have no selfish ends to serve. We don't want territory. We don't want reparations.
We're fighting for a concept, an idea.
We are fighting for the rights of mankind. This is the birth of American exceptionalism. The idea that the U.S. is unique because our power is used to spread freedom, not to conquer.
It's powerful rhetoric, but also connects right back to that anti-imperialist argument, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, Wilson is saying we're not an empire, but to make the world safe for democracy, he has to use imperial power. He has to send a massive army across an ocean and intervene.
That is the tension right there. He takes the moral high ground of the idealist, but uses the big stick methods of Roosevelt to get there.
So let's just recap the whole stack. We start in 1899 arguing about owning islands. By 1906, the government is checking our sausage and digging canals through other countries. And by 1917, we're sending millions of men to Europe to save democracy itself.
It is a breathtaking transformation. In less than a generation, the U.S. government defined its modern role, protector of social welfare at home and arbiter of democracy abroad.
We went from good luck, you're on your own, to don't worry, we're from the government and we're here to help.
Whether you want the help or not.
Right. Whether you're a meat packer in Chicago or a Kaiser in Germany. So here's my question for you and for everyone listening. We live in the world these documents built.
But we do.
We still argue about how much the government should regulate things, how much we should intervene in foreign conflicts. When you look at that core tension between the anti-imperialists and Wilson, can a nation really be a champion of the rights of mankind, like Wilson said, while also acting as the international police, like TR said?
That is the enduring American dilemma, isn't it? Are we saving the world or are we just molding it to look like us?
And are we doing it for them or for ourselves?
The documents suggest it's a little bit of both, and that ambiguity is something we've been grappling with ever since.
Something to think about the next time you eat a hot dog.
Hopefully a rat-free one.
One can hope. Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.